It's such an honor to be here and to introduce our first amazing speaker. His name is Buff Grace. He is the Director of Faith Networks at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. And Buff comes to this work after 15 years in parish ministry and various other vocations, it looks like. He has a rich background and works uniquely with people as they advocate and work toward climate justice. So obviously this is a passion of yours, and we are so looking forward to what you can tell us about this Inflation Reduction Act. I know I need to know more about it, so I will let Buff tell you more about who he is and about our topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks everybody for being here on Earth Day. Happy Earth Day to you. And big thank you to Oak Grove Presbyterian. Among the congregations that we work with, Oak Grove is kind of at the gold, I would say the platinum level for effectiveness and engagement on the topics of caring for creation and the details of really how to do that and orchestrate that well. So thank you, Oak Grove. Shall I just tell you to, okay, great, yeah. So Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light is one of 40 affiliates of a national organization called Interfaith Power and Light. We were started in 1998, and Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light started just in the early 2000s. So we work with people of faith, of all different faiths, across Minnesota. Our national organization works across the nation on any issue that deals with climate change. So we help congregations make a meaningful response. Our national organization also does some national lobbying on specific policy issues, and we were part of their work across the country in the last major federal election cycle to really turn out voters around climate issues. We really did a huge mobilization to bring climate up as an issue that people ought to be voting on. We aren't an advocacy type of organization that can advocate for particular candidates, but we can advocate for particular issues, and we really centered climate change. So when many of those who got elected, who had talked about climate change, came into power, we turned around and said, hey, you came into power making these promises, let's show us the money, show us what you got after you've made these campaign promises and come through for us. One of those is the big federal legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act. So if you feel like working at the systemic level for change at federal or state or local levels isn't effective, the Inflation Reduction Act is a good example of how you might be wrong in that respect. Okay? It does really matter. It takes a long time to make systemic change, but the results can be huge and change the whole foundation of the assumptions. Inflation Reduction Act is a good example of that. It was passed in August. It's the most comprehensive climate legislation in history. It begins the U.S. Aligning with the promises that we've made as a country for the Paris Climate Accord. It doesn't solve all of those and put us to actually arrive at all of our promises, but it puts us well down the path to do that. It was touted as a carrots approach rather than a stick. For a long time, one of the approaches has been let's tax the bad stuff, fossil fuels and our use of fossil fuels. This instead takes the position of let's give rewards and incentives for the good activities. So that's kind of the way it's constructed. Most of the provisions in this law extend through 2032, so it's a long-term legislation. That said, it's definitely still under construction. The law is there, it's hundreds of pages long, and everything in the law is going to come to bear, but exactly how that's going to be rolled out is still being figured out. And there's nothing surprising about this. When federal legislation is passed in these large, comprehensive ways, it takes time for the agencies that actually roll it out to do so. So the Department of Energy and the Internal Revenue Service are the primary ones that are doing this, and it's going to take them a while to roll that out. We've been getting information little by little all through 2023. I can tell you some of the things about it, but you should stay tuned through the summer and into the fall to finalize and hear exactly how things are going to be rolled out. You may have seen in the news recently, Wall Street Journal had a story on this, that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to provide $8 million worth of change for climate change. And some agencies have ballparked it at $370 million. So why the huge difference? Well, the difference is because it's really going to depend on people like you as to how much federal funds actually get appropriated for projects like this. This is an open-ended law. It depends on how many people actually take advantage of it as to how much money will actually be expended through this law. So the federal agency that kind of projects the budget, I can't come up with their name right at the moment. Some of you probably know what it is, but at the federal level, that agency ballparked it at around $370 million. Later, another agency came back and said, no, it's going to be $391. Then other folks have come in that aren't agencies but are analysts and have said, well, it could be as much as $8 million. So these are kind of the breakdown you see on the slide of some of the different areas. Again, it's going to depend on who takes advantage of this. And hopefully, more and more people will take advantage of it and we'll go way beyond that $370 million. Because for all the work that we take advantage of, that means reduced fossil fuels and reduced carbon emissions. Specifically for houses of worship and for nonprofits, there's a big change in the IRA. Previous to the IRA, nonprofits and non-tax entities, anybody that didn't pay taxes, couldn't get the advantages of a lot of implementing renewables. You had to go through kind of a third party. It was a bit of a financial yoga move. Put yourself in this kind of funky position to get some of the credit. Now, under the IRA, it's a direct pay, which means, for instance, Oak Grove, I think you've already got a solar system, but if you were in the position of needing a solar system and you installed one, then in the following year, just as if you did pay taxes, you could apply for the credit, and you would get 30% of the cost of the installation of that array in a direct payment to your congregation. Similarly, homeowners are in a similar boat and can get 30% tax credit off their taxes. We'll go over that a little bit more deeply. Alongside the Inflation Reduction Act, there was an infrastructure bill that was passed 2 years ago. So a year prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, we had the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act passed, and that also provided some funding for some renewable energy and climate response. It was built more integrally into building infrastructure, so it doesn't apply quite as easily to congregations or businesses or residents. It's a little bit more municipally focused, but it's also a very good bill. So some of the things that I'm going to go over here are the Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit, some of the bonus credits that are available, and some of the provisions, or they call them adders, so ways you can increase the amount of percentage back in rebates or payments. This slide gives you a graphic presentation of those adders. So you can see you kind of have a base credit of 30%. So for installing solar, for some renewable energy efficiency work, so switching to electricity. And just to be clear so that everybody understands, I think most people understand this, but just in case you don't, the value of moving to electrical systems is that electrical systems can be sourced by renewable energy. Clearly, if you're getting your energy from natural gas or coal or oil or other fossil fuels, that's going to emit carbon. But electricity, some of which is produced by carbon now, but electricity can be completely produced by renewable energies. And that's why there's such a incentive in this IRA to move towards electrification. So the base credit's 30%. That includes, it's actually at 6% to start with, but as long as you use fair wage and use the fair wage market, then you get the 30%, which almost everybody's going to do. So they don't even talk about the 6%. They just talk about the 30%. Then you can get some adders. So one of them is if you live in an energy community. I'll go into that a little bit in the future. The other is if the system that you're getting has domestic content. So if it's composed of materials that are sourced in the U.S., or if it's compiled in a manufacturing process that's done in the U.S., that's domestic content. So you can see that you could get an extra 20% right there. Then if you fit eligibility for any of the items in blue, that would be if you live in a low-income community, if you yourself are a low-income person, and that I'll show you a slide in a minute how that's defined, or if you live on tribal land, or if you have a low economic benefit. So we can go to the next one. So low income, you can get a 10 to 20% adder, depending on how you qualify there. There is a map. It's a little bit clunky to use, but there's the URL, and we can get that to you. But anyway, you can look on the map and see if your census tract lines up with the low-income community. There's the American-made stipulations, 40% of manufactured product, 100% of structural materials. Those rules have been promulgated now. We know what those are. Yep. This is a picture of the Allen S. King plant in Oak Park Heights on the banks of the St. Croix, out where I live. Allen S. King plant's a coal-fired power plant. It's going to be decommissioned in 2028. Yay, thanks be to God. I'm glad that's happening. And thanks be to Xcel, and thanks be to all the pressure that's been put on Xcel to decommission that. What that means for Oak Park Heights is pretty rough, because they're a small community. They get an enormous amount of their tax base from this coal plant. So they are one of those communities that qualifies as that energy community. And that's a community that's going to be impacted by a change in the structure of renewable energy and where we get our electricity from. So anyone in Oak Park Heights can get an extra 10%, and the municipality can get its own 10% discount on some of these projects, renewable energy and whatnot. There are other stipulations, so you don't only have to be a community that has a coal plant. You can be influenced in other ways, and it's somewhat complicated. I won't go into it right now, but has to do with some deals with pollution and those types of things, or other energy efficiencies. But the idea here is that we make a just transition. So we're not asking some portion of our population, our citizenry, to bear the brunt of this change. The IRA acknowledges that some people are going to have to change with the times, and that might be difficult. And so these extra provisions honor that and help make a more just transition. There's also a provision in the Inflation Reduction, or in the infrastructure bill, supported later by the Inflation Reduction Act, for a pilot program for the Department of Energy is rolling out an energy efficiencies material. So you can apply for, if you're a congregation, you can apply for specific grants and be part of this pilot program for implementing a lot of energy efficiency work and renewable energy projects. This is over and above those percentages that I showed you, because this is given through the Department of Energy, and there's a way that you can go on and apply for these grants. Our organization can assist with solar, and I do a lot of work helping congregations get solar proposals and analyze those and find out if solar is a good option. It is a good option for almost all congregations, but exactly what that looks like for your congregation. We don't do as much with energy efficiency. We refer our energy efficiency work out to some experts. CERTS is one of them. So if you're working with CERTS, they're great folks to work with. Interchange is also a really good organization. They're a nonprofit. They have the contract with Excel to provide services for energy audits to nonprofits, so you can get a free energy audit from Interchange and get free consultation from them. Ryan Kruger's a great person. There's his contact information up there. Next slide. If you want to go a little bit more complex, we also encourage folks to use Minify. Again, this would be for a congregation or a small business. These folks are great. Jeremy Davis and Ben Wallace are fantastic folks that work in the for-profit industry consulting on energy efficiency. Yep. There's all kinds of resources out there for houses of worship. Again, remember, the IRA is still being rolled out, so you're likely to, in a month or 2 months, need another slide deck like this given by another person. You can talk to us directly, but there'll be new information coming out. We hope the information comes as quickly as possible, but it's possible it may not be out till the fall. So we have some resources that you can get from our organization, either at the national level or our national IPL, or just through me. I can help you get those resources. We have a pretty sophisticated spreadsheet that's been put together that will knock out all the different adders and discounts for each different part of the IRA for houses of worship and businesses. Yep, that's not one that our organization per se put together in Minnesota. That's in Detroit, Michigan, but yes, that was one that was assisted by our national organization. Yep. So 30% you've heard over and over, the Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit includes solar and battery storage. So whether you put a solar installation on the roof or ground of your campus or your home, or whether you attach that to a battery storage system, you get 30% off both of those. You can also get a discount, a rebate off the cost of upgrading your electric panel if you need that in order to install the system. Electric vehicles are another way to improve our response to climate change. By going to electric vehicles, we not only don't burn fossil fuels in our vehicle, gasoline, but we also put more and more emphasis on the grid to be upgraded and for energy to be produced, electricity to be produced by renewables. So we create more demand, which creates more infrastructure that helps shift that. So you can get discounts on an electric vehicle now, and I'll go through that. That last slide was to point out that you can get a tax break if you're like a church for installing electric vehicle chargers to build that infrastructure. So you can discount that first part. This is from a slide deck that was a little bit, I haven't quite updated it, so we're after April 18th, but these are the different credits that you can get. You can get a $7,500 credit. It's important that the vehicles that you buy meet these different standards. And again, the point of these standards is to help that just transition so that manufacturing and folks whose jobs depend on the current structure get brought along and get moved into that transition in a just manner. So you can see you can also get a credit on a used car as well as a new car. There's your income caps. If you are single and you make $75,000 or less, you can get that used car credit. If you make $150,000 or less, you can, as a couple, you can get that credit. This is for used electric vehicles, and you must buy those from a dealer. So the next few slides just point out that there now has been released, this just came out April 18th, a list of all the different vehicles that qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. You can see what the manufacturer's suggested retail price is, what the credit amount is. So you can go to, those are all Chevrolets and Cadillac, and go to the next slide. There's your Fords. You can see some of those are not $7,500. That's because they don't meet all those stipulations with domestic content and that type of thing. You can go to the next slide. Yep. So here are your Teslas. You can see all of those except for the lowest kind of entry level model meet that. So some dealerships are giving you this rebate right up front. So unlike the credits that you would apply for in the typical tax cycle, some dealerships are saying, hey, if you'll come buy the car from us, we'll give you that rebate up front. We'll take it off the cost of the car right when you buy it, and then we'll handle getting the rebate for you. So that's a little provision. So it depends on which dealer you go to and exactly how they're doing that. Next slide. And then here you see Volkswagen also has a number of different hybrids and electric models that are also meeting the qualifications to get that rebate. So how about, so those electric vehicles are good for, you know, a congregation, for a business, for anybody that buys vehicles. They're also good for individuals. So if you're an individual, you can get those credits. Now, there are some credits that accrue to individuals that are slightly different than congregations or businesses. You also qualify for the 30% tax credit for solar storage and energy efficiency and home improvement. This is, you know, if you make certain energy efficiency changes to your house, you can get these things like if you buy an electric hot water heater, if you switch to an electric induction stove as opposed to a gas-powered stove, if you go in, if you buy into heat pump for your HVAC, which Alexis is going to talk about. Those are different examples of energy efficiency home improvements that you can get the 30% credit from. Then next slide. The IRA also includes some tax credits and rebates around your home electrification. So if you are going to implement these energy efficiencies and you find out, oh gosh, that's going to increase the demand in my house for electricity to the extent that I need a new electric panel or I need some electrical upgrades in addition to the panel, you can get support for that. There's also a particular rebate program for low-income folks, and it's called LMI, low and median income folks. You can see what the definition for low and medium, I can pull that up in just a minute. I don't have that right handy, but you may qualify for additional rebate programs in addition to those tax credits. So here's a couple of resources for individuals. And we're going to show, just before we finish, we're going to show the Rewiring America one, but there's Clean Energy, Energy Star. Those have been around for a while, and they have updated their content to include a lot of the information about the Inflation Reduction Act, so you can search on their websites and get a lot of information specific to your homeowner options there. Before we go to that website, though, I want to just mention two things that our organization is doing at the state level that are very important right now. You know, right now we're in the state legislature is in session. They're making decisions about bills and passing laws. They finish at the end of May, and our organization has been involved in a large comprehensive legislative platform. There are some of the kind of planks of the platform there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the different ones. You can go to the next slide. We noticed, as many organizations did, hey, we've got $15 to $17 billion state surplus projected. Why don't we use some of that money to respond to climate change? We noticed that the party in power in both the House, Senate, and governorship is the party that has said the most about climate change. And we noticed that there were a lot of environmental groups that wanted to work together to push forward some important legislation. So working with those organizations, we pushed forward legislation such as the 100% Clean Energy by 2040 bill, yay. Minnesota's on track. It's out leading the pack among states. And we're also supporting 2 other bills that we helped co-author. One of those is called MNCEFA, acronym that I'll explain in just a minute, and the other is to expand the Solar for Schools program. So you can go to the next slide. MNCEFA is called the Minnesota Climate Innovative Finance Authority. It's better known by the vernacular Green Bank. And what it means is that we create a public fund that can come alongside and help fund capital projects for renewable energy. Right now, if you want to get $10 million for a renewable energy project, you can do it. The big finance investors want to invest at that level. If you want $1 million, that's pretty hard to find. So the MNCEFA proves to help bridge the gaps where we see funding problems for renewable energy, and particularly to help preference communities that don't tend to get as much attention and as much loans. Connecticut is an example of a state that's implemented this type of financial authority. They put $322 million into their fund. They've leveraged it for $2 billion in private and federal dollars to come to their state. So $2 billion, a lot of the federal dollars in there are going to be IRA provision type dollars. So if our state wants to be out front getting those federal dollars, this is one way that we can ensure that we're going to get IRA dollars to our state, is to support this. So I really strongly encourage you, talk to your legislators, say, hey, I heard about MNCEFA, I know it's before you. Right now, it's maybe in a little jeopardy of being underfunded, so only $5 million or only $20 million. We really think it needs to be at $45 million to make a difference. That's the minimum it should be. So tell your legislator, hey, we really want MNCEFA. That's going to help us get a lot of federal and private dollars to our state. Next slide. And then the Solar for Schools program, as you may have heard, we have a really good program in our state for helping schools get solar energy. However, it's disproportionate in its advantages from Excel territory to those communities that are in other utility territories. The reason for that is that right now there's a maximum size, system size that can be built on schools that are outside Excel territory. It's 40 kilowatt DC, and 40 kilowatt DC is the size system you would put on a small business, or maybe even on a large home. So it's way too small for the school. If you think about the size that schools typically are, 40 kilowatt would take up a very small portion of the roof, which means that those schools aren't able to access the savings that they could if the law was written in a different way. Whereas schools in the metro area, in Excel territory, they can build as big a system as they want, and they can benefit, by leaps and bounds over rural schools. So we want to change that rule to expand to allow for those schools to get a fair shake, what we feel like is a fair shake, which will also increase a just transition in those areas and give more jobs to rural areas and improve the transition in those communities. So here's my contact information, buff@mnipl.org. My colleague Brett Pence is also very well versed in the IRA, actually better than I am, and is doing some great work up in the Duluth and Arrowhead area with respect to this. And then lastly, I'd just like to point out that website, if you'll go to that, Randy, thanks. Rewiring America is maybe the easiest site that we found to find out about what's available for the IRA. It makes it extremely easy for you to plug in your zip code, your household income, and then when you do that and you press the button, you can just scroll on down. It'll show you a whole host of different measures that you can take at your household level and what the rebates are, the top amount that you can receive from those if you fit all the different eligibility requirements. So I highly recommend this. You could just Google Rewiring America IRA calculator. It'll come right up, and you can test that. Again, exactly what the mechanism is to apply for all these is still to be rolled out by the IRS. But stay in touch with folks like Oak Grove and myself at MNPL and CERTS and these others. It's our mission to help you get the IRA funds. We want, it's our mission to help make this just transition to renewable energy. We'll help you figure it out. Thank you.
Let's open it up for questions right now. And if you would just raise your hand, we'll get a microphone for you. Hi, I'm Bob Silvani. I'm from Lilydale, Minnesota.
Hi, Bob.
Glad to be here. Thank you for sponsoring this. What was the name of the person in Duluth that does the Iron Range area? You had it on.
Yeah, his name is Brett, B-R-E-T, Pence, P-E-N-C-E. Brett Pence at mnipl.org. He's in our Duluth office. We have an office in Gloria Dei Lutheran Church there in Duluth, and he's there. Yeah, he can help you with Iron Range projects. Yep.
And some of these projects, do we require the, trying to come up with the right term, payback? Would we be able to get help determining the payback for the investments?
Yes, that's a good question. You want to know what your ROI is on the amount?
Return on investment, correct.
Yeah, return on investment. So if you, let's say your congregation or you're a homeowner and you get a solar proposal from a developer that that offers to install a solar array, they'll give you a spreadsheet for 30 years on what that payback looks like. They'll do it for, let's say you have to take out a loan to afford that. They'll show you compare your savings compared to that loan, including the tax credit and any other incentives that you're eligible for, those types of things, and they'll pencil that out for you so you can see exactly what year you get a return on. Interchange, I believe, will do the same thing when they help you understand what your options are for, say, LED upgrades for your light bulbs, or weatherization or insulation, those types of, or if you, I believe even there are, Rewiring America, I think, can even help you with an induction stove. If you were to buy an induction stove, they'll show you what the payback period is, what you can expect to turn around for that.
Back about 30, 40 years ago, I think, in St. Paul, there was a group for energy conservation. And what they did at that time was they combined their efforts with NSP at that time. And they would come in and do an analysis and do weatherization, replace heating elements and things of that nature. And it was all funded upfront by them.
Yeah, yes, there's still an organization along those lines. It's called CEE, or Center for Energy and the Environment. And the Public Utility Commission requires Xcel Energy to fund a program like this to decrease energy use. And CEE is the organization that kind of assists customers with doing that at the household level. Interchange is an organization that does that at kind of the nonprofit level.
Well, and then the cost was added on to the bill on a monthly basis till it was paid off. And it ended up that a friend of mine did, an organization of mine did that, and they had to reduce the amount every month because they didn't project how much savings they would have. It was really an interest. Within 4 or 5 years, they had it all paid off. It was a marvelous opportunity. We did that here. We'll get into the details on the tour, but when we did the LED lights, we did it in 3 phases. And we had Center for Energy and Environment come in and do the audit. And they actually specified what bulbs to use and how much it would pay and what the payback was. And when we got all done doing it, their numbers were right on. And the good thing about that was that we went to one
electrical contractor, and they gave us costs that were like way out of sight. And we said, we got this spec sheet from CEE. Do you want to rebid the project? And they did. And all the bids came in because they knew that we had the energy audit and we had the return on investment. The return on investment for our church was 5 or 6 years on lights that will last for 15 or 20, and it cut our electrical consumption by 35%. So, you know, for a congregation or almost anybody, I think that's kind of like the starting point. So, more questions?
John Graves, I live here in Bloomington. I believe you said the IRS is still working out some of the rules regarding the IRA. Any possibility that some of these credits could be retroactive? The reason being is I've got a lot of credits, if not.
Yes, I'm not familiar with the fine details. My understanding is if the system was put into action post August 16th, 2022, it's eligible. If it's prior to that, I don't know if it's eligible. Okay. Yeah. Do you know, Alexis, is it?
I think it's for 2023.
Yeah, just January 1st. Okay.
What questions do you have? Well, if they come up during the tours or later on, feel free to